الشباب اللي على القهوة هات قهوتك وتعالى جنبي. يلا يا شباب. كيف أنسى؟ الساعة 7 وربع. أنا هبدأ بقى. واحد، واللي بياكل يبطل أكل واللي بيشرب يبطل شرب. نبدأ مع بعض. 1 2 3. كيف أنسى سيدي الغالي المسيح، كيف أنسى دام ذا الجنب الجريح، كيف أنسى سيدي الغالي المسيح، كيف أنسى دام ذي الجنب الجريح. من رآني في هواني فأتى طوعا إلي، من فداني واشتراني كاسرا قيد يدي. من رآني في هواني فأتى طوعا إلي، من فداني واشتراني كاسرا قيد يدي. كيف أنسى قلبك العافي الكبير، من عفا عني وعن جرم الخطير. كيف أنسى قلبك العافي الكبير، من عفا عني وعن جرم الخطير. فمحى كل ذنوبي وابتدى عهدا جديدا، وملا فغدا قلبي سعيدا. فمحى كل ذنوبي وابتدى عهدا جديدا، وملا بالروح قلبي فغدا قلبي سعيدا. هبني أنسى سيدي ذاتي هناك، فعنادي قد أذاقني العناء، وأغني في حياتي عالما أني غريب، ذاكرا أنك ربي سوف تأتي عن قريب. وأغني في حياتي عالما أني غريب، ذاكرا أنك ربي سوف تأتي عن قريب. تعيشوا وترنموا on time.
Hello, everybody. Feel free to move up because there's not a lot of people here. Hello? Oh. Can you hear like this? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. As you know, this is part of a 3-week series about safety. Last week we talked about adult safety, and this week we're going to talk about children's safety, specifically K through 6. So first, I just want to say a few things before we begin. So first, this talk is not recommended for kids who will understand anything I'm saying. It's about how parents should be talking in age-appropriate ways with their children, not specifically for children. So some of these things that you might not want your children to hear the way I'm saying it, you might want to say it in your own ways. So just a disclaimer that it's not for children. This is really just for adults and caregivers. And the purpose is really to build a relationship with your children and create open communication between you and your children. So that just to lay down the groundwork and the foundation of the rest of this presentation, that's basically what we'll be doing. Okay? A couple of other things before we begin. So first, take care of yourselves. So we're going to be talking about some things that might be really difficult to hear and things that might be triggering or upsetting or remind you of something that's upsetting. So make sure you're taking time to take care of yourself. Go make yourself some tea, take a walk, step out if you need to. If you're feeling upset by whatever is being said, take time for yourself and do what you need to do. Also, I think I'm funny. Some people don't think I'm funny. I will try to use humor throughout the presentation, mainly just to engage you and keep a very hard topic light. It's not because I think this topic is funny. It's not because I'm making fun of this topic. It's just to engage you and keep us focused and engaged. And the third thing is blame. So by no means, I don't want anyone to leave here and feel, oh, I didn't do that or I haven't done that, and to feel blame for themselves, because that's not the purpose of the presentation. It's to teach you moving forward what to be doing or what you could be doing. So I hope that no one leaves this saying, oh, like, I never did that and now I'm to blame, or I put my child at risk. That's not the purpose of this presentation at all. So just things to keep in mind. And then the last thing is what we'll be talking about today. So the objective is basically just to understand what is child sexual abuse, and how to create open communication with your children. And so we'll be doing that by defining what is child sexual abuse, talking about how to teach our children about safety through body safety, through the internet, secrets, strangers, and then also what to do if my child discloses sexual abuse. So talking about sexual development in general can be very uncomfortable. I mean, among adults it's uncomfortable, and especially talking to your child it could be uncomfortable, but it's very necessary. You know, you want to ensure, again, I feel like I'm going to say this throughout the talk, but we want to ensure open communication between you and your children, and that you're that source of support for them. So if they have questions, you want to be that person that they come to. And so you're establishing these safety measures from the beginning with your child so that you can create that open communication. And you're making sure your child comes to you with those questions, because you don't want them to go to their friends, you don't want them to go to the internet or TV. Like, you don't want them to get the information from those sources. You want them to come to you for that information, okay? So I'm going to pause now. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to pause and do a quick translation. So this is one of those moments.
So النهارده عايزين نتكلم عن دورنا كآباء ضد الاعتداء الجنسي للأطفال. لا يرجح يبقى أطفال موجودين في الأوضة. الكلمة النهارده mainly للأدلتس، لأولياء الأمور. تينا اتكلمت عن انه قبل ما نتكلم في الموضوع ده، احنا عارفين ان الموضوع ده يعني متعب وهيضايق، فلو محتاجين تاخدوا لحظة تطلعوا برا تشربوا مية، اي حاجة to take care of yourself، عايزينكم تعملوا كده. ولو عندكم اي استفسار اي سؤال ممكن تيجوا لأي حد فينا اللي لابس التيشيرت الزرقاء. النهارده عايزين نتكلم عن، زي ما انا قلت، نعرف يعني ايه، ما هو الاعتداء الجنسي عند الاطفال، ازاي الوقايه منه والحمايه، بحيث ان احنا يبقى نقدر يبقى في environment امن وسلامه اولادنا. ممكن يكون الكلام عن الاعتداء الجنسي مع الاطفال او تعليمهم اي حاجه ليها علاقه بالاعتداء الجنسي يعني ممكن تبقى حاجه مش مريحه، بس حاجه ضروريه جدا ومهمه جدا كدورنا احنا كاولياء امور لاولادنا. لان اللي احنا بنعمله ان احنا بنحصنهم، بنديهم بنعلمهم، لانه هيبقى سلاحهم العلام، ان هم عارفين الصح من الغلط وازاي يقدروا يحموا انفسهم في الاوقات اللي احنا مش موجودين معاهم فيها. صح؟ كمان تينا النهارده هتتكلم على كل الاشكال بتاعه الاعتداء الجنسي، سواء جسديا او على الانترنت، او وازاي الحمايه والوقايه منه.
Thank you. Sorry, one other thing I forgot to say. So I'm here as a Gabi Project, and a Gabi Project does education about safety in general. And one thing I just want to know also that we talked about last week was that oftentimes when we do these presentations, we get a lot of questions about specifically about LGBTQ, but this is not that talk. We've done talks about that, and we can have more talks about that, but this is specifically about safety and about child sexual abuse.
النهارده احنا هنتكلم على الاعتداء الجنسي للاطفال وازاي الوقايه منه. ساعات بتجيلنا اسئله كتيره عن ال LGBT الحاجتين دول مش مالهمش علاقه ببعض، فالنهارده هيبقى التركيز الفوكس بس هيبقى على ما هو الاعتداء الجنسي للاطفال وكيفيه الوقايه منه.
All right. So we'll start very simple. What is child sexual abuse? We'll start with a very basic definition. So child sexual abuse is any interaction between a child and an adult that causes sexual stimulation, okay? And that can include a lot of things. The adult in this case, I'm going to refer to as the perpetrator. So that's the person who that's getting stimulated basically by the interaction. There is also child-on-child problematic sexual behavior, which is not specifically what we're talking about today, but that's basically when children do sexual things together. That's different than what we're going to be talking about today, but is another thing to be aware of. And with that specifically, what you should be aware of is if the kids are similar ages, or if there's a big age gap, if the kids have the same cognitive ability, or if there's a big difference between the kids' cognitive ability, and then also what's age appropriate at that time. So younger kids tend to be a little bit more curious, so it might be okay, versus older children it might not. Just something to keep in mind, but again, not the focus of our talk. Also, some things to know, children, I know we talked about consent last week, children cannot consent to sexual interactions. So any sexual interaction between adult and a minor is child abuse. It can include touching and non-touching. So touching behaviors could be touching of the vagina, the penis, the buttocks, the breasts. It could be sexual intercourse. So it can kind of range. Non-touching could be voyeurism, which is basically looking at a naked body, so having the child undressed, for example. It could be exhibitionism, which is basically the adult exposing herself or himself to the child. Or it could be exposing the child to pornography. So something to keep in mind, it could be touching or non-touching. It's still considered sexual abuse. And abusers may use physical force or coercion to engage the child, but usually they're doing grooming. They're using grooming. And so grooming is basically when they try to entice the child in ways that are not forceful or coercion. They're playing with the child, they're providing candy, they're manipulating the child essentially, right, to try to get them to trust the adult. And then little by little, they're doing more things. And in that process, they might start with something small to try to see what they can get away with, for example, like, will they let me do this? Will they let me put my hand here, for example? Will they come with me without telling their parent, right? So those are all grooming behaviors, so something to keep in mind. They're doing nice things, and then it leads to something inappropriate. And then the last thing is also no community or population is immune from sexual abuse. It happens everywhere. It's widespread and it happens everywhere. So just something to keep in mind that nobody's immune from it.
طيب تعريف الاعتداء الجنسي هو تفاعل ما بين طفل وأي شخص بالغ. وبيستخدم فيه الطفل للتحفيز الجنسي للجاني. دلوقتي الاعتداء الجنسي ده بيشمل اللمس وغير اللمس. اللمس بيبقى عن طريق لمس المهبل او القضيب او الثديين او الارداف او الاتصال الفمولي او علاقه جنسيه كامله. اللي غير اللمس بقى بتبقى محاولة ان هم يشوفوا الطفل عريان او الجاني يقلع او تقلع هدومها، فالطفل هو اللي يشوف البالغ واعضائه الجسديه كلها، او تعريض الطفل لمواد اباحيه سواء بقى على الانترنت او صور او اي حاجه. غالبا الجاني او المعتدي ساعات بيستخدم يعني قوة جسدية، بس في احيانا كتير جدا ما بيستخدمش القوة الجسدية دي، ولكن بيستخدم حاجة اللي هي الاستدراك، او اللي هي يخدع الطفل، او مثلا يهدده انه لو قلت هتحصل لك مشكلة، ولا ما حدش هيصدقك، ولا يبقى فيه بيستدركه. وممكن برضو الجاني يبقى يجيب لهم مثلا حاجه حلوه او يضحك عليهم، او يبتدي بخطوات صغيره علشان يشوف الطفل هيعمل ايه، هل هيرجع لاهله، هل هيقول حاجه، هل مش هيقول، هيتصرف ازاي، وبعدين يبتدي الموضوع يزيد اكتر واكتر. للاسف ما فيش مجتمع او دوله خاليه من الاعتداء الجنسي ضد الاطفال، وده شيء للاسف جدا. ولكن النهارده المضمون بتاع الكلمه النهارده ان احنا نتعلم ازاي التوعيه وسلاح التعليم، وان احنا نوعي اولادنا من سن صغير جدا علشان يقدروا يحموا نفسهم ضد الاعتداء الجنسي.
Okay, so one common thing is why don't children disclose? So if something was happening, God forbid, why wouldn't a child say something out loud or tell an trusted adult? And there's a few different reasons for that. The first one is fear. So fear for a lot of different reasons. Fear of not being believed. So the abuser might say, no one's going to believe you, you're just a kid, I'm important, you're nothing, right? So they may fear that no one's going to believe them. They might be afraid of their own life or their family's life, so the abuser might have threatened them and said, if you tell anyone, I'm going to hurt you. If you tell anyone, I'm going to hurt your little brother, your little sister, or your mom, or your dad, right? So fear in that sense of someone being hurt. And also it could be fear of getting the abuser in trouble. So as we'll learn, the abuser might be someone that this child knows and trusts and cares about even. So they might be conflicted and feel like, okay, I know this is wrong and I want to tell someone, but I love this person and I don't want them to get in trouble. So there's a lot of fear associated with disclosing. The second reason could be shame and or guilt. And I think the distinction here is that shame and guilt are very different things. The way I think of guilt is a feeling that you did something wrong. So like, I feel bad that I did this, and that could be coming from the abuser. Again, the abuser might say, well, you didn't say no, or you let me do it, or you took this candy and we did whatever. This was you too, right? So it's guilt that they might have done something wrong. But shame is more like, I am bad, like I am wrong and I am bad, right? So they might have those feelings of shame and or guilt. And again, that distinction is really important. And the last reason might be because they might just not have the language for it or an understanding of what's happening. So some children, again, depending on age and developmental ability, might not know what's happening is wrong, or might not be able to articulate what's happening and say, this is happening and it's inappropriate. They just might not have the language for it. And that's because they're little. And it's because they're little and because the abuser is probably telling them it's okay. I'm an adult and I'm telling you this is okay, right? So it's that, again, they don't know that it's wrong necessarily. Two more things to keep in mind that often come up. The first is the rates of false allegations are really, really low. The fact is children usually do not make a false allegations and say that they were sexually abused when they weren't sexually abused. The first reason is because the first reason because all the things that we just talked about, right? Like they already don't disclose. So they already have all these barriers to disclosing. So if they're disclosing, they're probably telling the truth. The second is because it's really not in their best interest. Like for a child to disclose is not in their best interest. It's a scary thing. They don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen to the abuser, what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to their parents. So for all of those reasons, they don't usually disclose. And the other thing is they usually don't even have the sexual knowledge to be making stuff like that up. So if a child is disclosing sexual abuse, they probably don't know that that is sex, right? Or that it's something sexual because they're so little. So that's another reason. There's really not a lot of good data on it, unfortunately, but professionals in the field say like the rates of false accusations are very, very low and they're very rare. Yeah.
Of the false accusations, what the research shows is that of that like really small number, so I think it's like 98% of allegations are true. So of that, like 2 or 3%, the majority of those cases are either kids in custody battles, so mom and dad are getting divorced, they're making stuff up, again, in that very small number, or it's sometimes kids in foster care. And it's not that they're making things up. They consider it false if they share one thing but not the other. If they over-exaggerate, so to speak, they'll call it a false accusation. So even the false ones aren't even really always false. Sometimes it's just or lack of information or too much information. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you. The other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes kids take back their disclosure, and that's called recanting. So they might recant that disclosure for a lot of different reasons. Again, fear, the chaos that sometimes comes after disclosing, all of the reasons that we just talked about. And again, they might have that mixed feeling about the abuser, like, oh no, that person's in trouble now and I care about them. Like, what did I do? I'm going to take it back. Or they might be dealing with their issues of own denial. So they might say, like, well, maybe that didn't really happen. Or like, I can't believe I let that happen. I'm going to take it back because, like, I don't want this, this domino effect of everything else happening after my disclosure to happen. They're taking it back. And sometimes in some families, the child is pressured to recant. For a lot of different reasons. Maybe it ruins the family function or the order or whatever it is. So the child feels like, okay, no, this didn't happen to you. You need to recant. Or maybe not directly like that, but the child understands that I need to take back whatever I just disclosed. And again, like Mary mentioned, a very small percentage of children are actually telling something false. And in those cases, there are special circumstances usually. So the next thing is, what are the signs? Sometimes there are signs and sometimes there are not. Some signs that you could look out for. Sorry, my computer's frozen. Some things to look out for are like just any changes in behavior, basically like increased aggression, nightmares, inappropriate sexual knowledge, things that are not appropriate for their age, something that you didn't teach them, for example, or that you don't think they know. Sexualized behavior sometimes. It could be withdrawal, so your child all of a sudden just shuts down. But what I always say is look for any drastic changes of behavior. If your child's behavior is changing drastically, then something might have happened. I'm not saying it's sexual abuse, but usually, like, your kids, if they come home in a bad mood, okay, what happened at school today? Like, let's figure out what's behind these behaviors, because every behavior has a meaning. So any drastic changes of behavior are usually a sign that something happened. There could also be physical symptoms sometimes, like constipation or UTIs, things like that. But that's like in extreme cases of chronic and prolonged sexual abuse. But again, many children might not display any behaviors at all. And so as parents, the important thing, again, is prevention and communication, which is what we'll go on to talk about.
طيب في ثلاث أجزاء مهمين هنتكلم عليهم دلوقتي. إنه ليه الطفل ممكن ما يقولش لما يتعرض لموقف يعني لسوء معاملة أو لاعتداء جنسي. أول حاجة الخوف من إن هو ما يتصدقش. ممكن يكون أصلا الجاني أقنعه إنه محدش هيصدقك، أو خوف على أهله إنه مثلا ده أنت كده هتضر بأهلك، ده لو حد، يعني تخويف إنه هو يفصح بالسر ده. تاني نقطة الإحساس بالعار والشعور بالذنب، والإحساسين دول مختلفين تماما. إحساس العار إنه هو إحساس وحش قوي، لأنه إن أنا عملت حاجة غلط، أو إن هو أنا الغلط، أنا اللي عملت حاجة وحشة. والجاني بيبقى ساعات هو ده مربط الفرس بالنسبة له، هو عايز الطفل يصدق كده. لكن الشعور بالذنب ده يختلف. شعور الذنب إنه حاسس إن أنا أكيد أنا عملت حاجة فأدت إلى اللي حصل، فيبقى حاسس بالذنب تجاه اللي حصل. أو يجاني يستخدم نوع من إنه مثلا أنا جبت لك شوكولاتة، أنا جبت لك لعب، ده أنا خرجت، خصوصا لو الجاني ده حد هم يعرفوه أو من الدايرة الصغيرة اللي المفروض الطفل بيثق فيها، من الدايرة اللي من حواليه أو حوالين أهله. فيحس انه شاعر بالذنب. فالشعورين دول مختلفين تماما. شعور الاحساس بالعار والشعور بالذنب حاجه مختلفه. ممكن تكون الحاجه الثانيه ان الطفل مش قادر يقول او خايف يقول، انه مش عارف يعبر او مش فاهم اللي بيحصل له، او مش عارف ان اللي هو فيه ده اعتداء او اساءه ليه. فساعات بيبقوا مش قادرين يشرحوا او مش عارفين يشرحوا اللي هم بيمروا بيه. طيب في في حاجتين عايزين بس نخليهم في اذهاننا يعني كوالدين، انه لما نسبة ان في ادعاءات كاذبة ضئيلة جدا جدا جدا، وخصوصا في الاطفال. لما الطفل بيجي يحكي او يقول اللي حصل له، هو مش مستفيد حاجة ان هو يألف قصة ويحكيها، وخصوصا لو الطفل بيحكي تفاصيل معينة ان احنا عارفين هو اكيد مر بيها فحكيها. يعني ده مش علم مسبق ليه، هو ما درسوش في حتة، ما عرفوش في حتة. وساعات النقطة التانية لازم نخليها في الذهن، انه لو الطفل ده بيتمارس عليه حتة الضغط العصبي، ان ما تقولش ده غلط، يعني الاحساسه بالخوف هيؤدي الى انه ساعات ممكن يغيروا كلامهم، او يرجع يقول لك لا 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 يمكن انا عشان انا اللي غلطت، يبقى انا بيبقى عايز يحمي اللي حواليه او يحمي نفسه. فساعات ليهم يغيروا الكلام، بس معنى تغيير الكلام ده مش معناه ان ده ما حصلش، او انه لما جم قالوا ان الكلام ده ما حصلش. absolutely not. اوكي. طيب اخر حاجه تينا اتكلمت عليها، ايه هي الاعراض الساينز؟ طب انا اعرف منين او ازاي حتى اخمن او افهم ان في حاجه غريبه بتحصل؟ في نوعين من الاطفال. في اطفال هتبان عليهم، ممكن مثلا في السلوك، في اللغه، ممكن تلاقيهم بيستخدموا مصطلحات او لغه، او يعرفوا معرفه جنسيه كبيره قوي على سنهم. في الحته دي بنبقى احنا لازم نركز، نعرف يعني نبقى عارفين ان دي ساين. او ممكن يبقى الطفل عايز يبقى منعزل تماما، او عدواني، او جست خايف، تلاقيه مثلا كوابيس، او حتى مش عايز يروح المدرسه، او مش عايزه تروح المدرسه. فده في اطفال هيبان عليهم كده. في اطفال للاسف مش هيبان عليهم اي حاجه، او مش هيظهروا اي حاجه. فبالتالي اهم حاجه عندنا نقطتين مهمين. فعشان كده احنا في نقطتين مهمين لازم نشتغل عليهم على اطفالنا من بدري جدا، اللي هي التركيز على الوقايه والتواصل. التواصل يبقى فيه open communication، يبقى فيه حوار مفتوح، بس فيه trust ما بيني وما بين ابني، ان هم ابني او بنتي يقدروا يجوا ويتكلموا معايا ويبقوا حاسين بالامان وهم بيتكلموا معايا.
Thanks. Everything sounds so much better in Arabic. I don't know why. Okay. So before we start, just to talk about prevention and communication, I just wanted to bring up some myths and misconceptions about child sexual abuse. And these are things that we might have heard, we might think, we might believe them ourselves, but it's important to get them straight before we start. So one common myth is that child sexual abuse is a rare experience. And unfortunately, that is a myth. The truth is, child sexual abuse is actually very common. These are the stats, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 20 boys. I think the one for boys could be 1 in 20, 1 in 13. There's differing stats on it. But the fact is, it's a lot, right? So it's not that rare. It does happen. And because child sexual abuse and sexual abuse in general is very secretive, and as we just said, children don't always disclose right away or even at all, these numbers could actually be much higher than we know. But based on the data that we have, these are the rates. The next myth is that a child is most likely to be sexually abused by a stranger. Again, unfortunately, that's untrue. The data says over 90% of cases of child sexual abuse the abuser was someone the child knew and trusted, someone within that child's inner circle. It could be a relative, a distant relative, a friend, a family friend, someone within that circle. But most likely, the abuser is someone that child knows and trusts, and that the family knows and trusts. Because child sexual abuse is a lot about access. So who does this person have access to and can easily get by themselves? Another common one is that young children, like preschool or other grades, don't need to know about child sexual abuse because it's scary, and they would be scared if they knew about it. Again, I understand where that idea comes from, but this is, again, not true. Just as you would teach a preschooler about like how to cross the street safely, or what to do in case of a fire, or if you're in a dangerous situation, how do you get out? It's the same exact thing, right? It's at the end of the day, it's about safety, and that's exactly what this is. So is it scary to say, if you're in a fire, this is what you do? Maybe a little bit, but you would rather your child be safe, right, and know what to do than have that moment of like, oh my God, what would I do, right? You want your kids to have the tools to be able to keep themselves safe. And there's a lot of educational programs available so that you can teach your child ways about keeping their body safe in age-appropriate ways. And there are ways for each age group, right? So like this one specifically, this fire is really great, and it's actually available in so many languages. It's available in Arabic too. And it's just basic things about how to keep yourself safe. And they need to know the difference, right? They need to know the difference about how to, like, what is safe and what's not safe. Yeah, so that you can do it in a way that's not frightening. And the other thing is that there are a lot of books available too. These are 3 specific books that we came across that are helpful for you to reach your children, to teach them about safety. But there's a lot of other books as well. And if you're interested, you can go to your library. You could talk to one of us. We're happy to help find recommendations for you so that you can reach your children and talk to them about how to keep themselves safe. You mind waiting? Yeah, we can do another one. All right, and then the last one, I think. Most children would tell an adult if someone was touching them inappropriately. Again, like we talked about, a lot of kids don't disclose. And actually, based on the data, 2 out of 3 people who were abused as children said that they never disclosed as a child, and some of them never disclosed at all. Again, for all of those reasons that we talked about why children don't disclose in the first place, or why they might recant, or why they might feel scared of disclosing. So a lot of kids don't disclose.
طيب هنتكلم عن المفاهيم الخاطئة عن الاعتداء الجنسي وإيه هي المفاهيم الصحيحة. أول فهم خاطئ إنه الاعتداء الجنسي على الأطفال دي حاجة نادرة جدا ما بتحصلش مرة كل فين وفين. للأسف ده دي فكرة مش صحيحة. للأسف الاعتداء الجنسي على الأطفال مش حاجة نادرة، والأبحاث والدراسات ورت إنه في البنات 1 من كل 4 بنات، وفي الولاد 1 في كل 20 ولد بيتعرضوا لشكل أو نوع ما من الإساءة أو الاعتداء الجنسي قبل ما يتموا 18 سنة. ولأن الاعتداء الجنسي أو الإساءة بتبقى طبيعتها إنه فيها تخويف أو ترهيب للطفل أو إنه ما يقولش حاجة، في حالات كتيرة جدا كمان ما بيتبلغش عليها. في فكر تاني خاطئ اللي هو ان مثلا ان الاطفال اللي بيتعرضوا لاساءه او اعتداء جنسي بتبقى دايما من شخص غريب حد ما يعرفوهوش. للاسف انه ده فكر خاطئ، ان اغلبيه الاطفال اللي بيتعرضوا لاعتداء جنسي بيبقوا من ناس في الاطار القريب عليهم، اللي هي للاسف من ناس هم بيثقوا فيهم. فكر خاطئ تاني انه الاطفال في مرحلة اللي هم قبل ما يروحوا المدرسة، يعني هم صغيرين قوي، لا دول صغيرين قوي مش محتاجين نعرفهم أي حاجة ولا نخوفهم ولا نحط كلام في ودانهم أو في مخهم. ده برضو فكر اعتقاد خاطئ، لأنه مفيد للطفل، ده من أمان الطفل إنه يبقى عارف، يبقى متعلم، يبقى واعي ليه اللي بيحصل من الاعتداء الجنسي أو الإساءة للأطفال. يبقى ده انتوا بتسلحوهم بعلم فيقدروا يحموا نفسهم. في يعني كتب وفي موارد كتيرة بتساعد الأطفال تعلمهم يعني إيه الإساءة ويعني إيه الاعتداء الجنسي وإزاي يحموا نفسهم بطريقة مبسطة جدا من غير ما تخوفهم، وبلغة بسيطة لسنهم هتلائم السن بتاعهم age appropriate. في برضو فكرة خاطئة انه الاطفال دايما اول ما حاجة بتحصل لهم اساءة او اعتداء جنسي على طول بيروحوا يقولوا لحد كبير او على طول بيروحوا يقولوا لاهلهم. للاسف الشديد الدراسات اثبتت والابحاث اثبتت انه 2 طفلين من كل 3 ما بيقولوش، وبالتالي ما بتتعرفش، فمنقدرش المهنيين او ما حدش بيقدر يساعدهم في الوقت المناسب.
Yeah, so Maggie and Martina are passing out some papers and pens. If you want to ask a question anonymously or whatever, just ask a question and you can pass it up at, while we're talking. Okay. So I want you guys to take a moment with everything that we've talked about so far. Just take a moment and think about these 2 questions. Think about them to yourself. So what conversations do you have or have you had with your child about safety? And think of also what types of conversations did your own parents have with you about safety? So just thinking about that in the context of these next few slides.
طيب عايزين بس تاخدوا دقيقة كده بسيطة انه تفكروا، يعني تفتكروا مثلا ايه نوع الحوار اللي انتوا يعني اتكلمتوا فيه مع اهاليكم له علاقة بالموضوع ده، ولو مش مثلا وانتوا صغيرين مع اولادكم، هل في فترة او اي وقت يعني اتكلمتوا مع اولادكم في الموضوع ده. فهنديكم about a minute يعني just كده بس دقيقة تفكروا للسؤال، على السؤال ده، انه ما هي نوع الحوار اللي you've had مع اهلك او ايه نوع الحوار اللي انت you've had مع اولادك.
Thank you. And I want you guys just to think about this. Don't take a lot of time. Just think about it in the context of how we grew up and how we're raising our children also, and how important this topic is, and what we'll be doing moving forward. Okay. So what can we do as parents, right? So we know there's child sexual abuse. It's very scary. If we can keep our kids in a bubble, I probably would, because the world is scary. There are a lot of bad people, right? But we can't, and we can't be with our children 100% of the time. So we have to focus on what we can control, which is giving them tools to keep themselves safe. And so, in the context of sexual abuse, the first step of doing this is teaching our kids about their body. So just like all parts of human development, sexual development begins at birth, right? So from birth, they're developing sexually in different ways, and they're learning about their body. And an infant will look at their caregiver and say, like, mama, right? They look to you for words. They look to you when they're trying to walk, when they're taking their first steps. They're looking at you, am I doing this right, right? They're always learning from you, and they're looking to you. And it's the exact same thing when it comes to sexual development, right? They're looking to you to learn about their bodies. And children are naturally curious, so they're going to ask a lot of questions, and they're going to ask questions that might make us uncomfortable. But again, that's part of growing up, and we want to be the people who teach our children those things. So the first thing is we have to teach children proper names for their body parts, okay? If your child says, what is this? You wouldn't say it's a thingy, right? And you wouldn't call it a cookie, right? So you have to use the appropriate names for their body parts, and that means all of their body parts. So say penis, say vagina, say breast, right? Say all of those things so they know what they are. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. Why? Why do I have to tell them these things, right? And there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons, but first I want to tell you something. You're thinking why, because what if my child screams penis at Chick-fil-A? Or what if my child says vagina in the grocery store? And I will tell you, it has happened, and it will happen, and it will be okay. Because it's important for them to know, because, again, it promotes that positive body image. So if your child is saying, what's the name of my penis, and you're not telling them, it's giving them a message that could be harmful. Because when you're giving your child nicknames or incorrect names for their body parts, it could create shame. So like, oh, I shouldn't talk about this. I should be ashamed of it. If it's like, or like, don't talk about it, then they're not going to talk about it. And if God forbid something happens or they have a question, they're not going to come to you necessarily, right? They're going to go to their friends and ask about it. So it's really important that you have accurate names for all of their body parts, even though it feels uncomfortable. But again, you're creating that open and honest dialogue with your child, and we want them to come to us, right? And you're building that relationship. Another reason for them to know their body parts is because if there's an abuser who sees that a child knows their body and knows their body parts, that abuser will know, okay, maybe that child knows what's okay and what's not okay, right? So maybe I won't get away with everything with this child because this child's informed and this child has an adult who's talking to them, right? So that's another reason. It makes them less vulnerable to that abuse. I'm not saying it'll prevent abuse. I'm just saying it'll make them less vulnerable to that abuse, because people will know, okay, that child knows their body, right? And they knows what's safe and what's not safe. Another reason is, it helps for, if God forbid something does happen, it helps with the disclosure. So if God forbid something does happen and your child discloses and police are saying what happened, it's important for your child to be able to appropriately say what happened using the correct body parts and language, because it'll help them, in that investigation period and things like that. And if your child does scream penis or vagina in the grocery store, it's an opportunity to say, these are private words. We say them with mommy and daddy at home when we're together, right? It's not something to be screaming out. So it's embarrassing, but it's also an opportunity, again, for learning and communicating with your child. Did you want to do the next one, or you want to start here? Okay. Okay, the next question that you might have is when. Okay, so when should I start telling my child about their body and about safety? Should I do it when they're babies? Should I do it when they're teenagers? Should I do it when they're engaged to be married and just wait for that? We've established that kids are curious, and they're always learning, and they're always looking to you, and they're always asking questions. And so in that context, we should always be talking to our child about safety and about their body, like always. There's no one correct age that, like, okay, when they're 7, you're going to sit them down and teach them everything they need to know about their body and everything they need to know about safety, right? That doesn't happen in parenting ever, like in any context, not just about body safety or abuse. you're always teaching your child throughout their life, and it's the same with this. You're always going to be teaching them about their body and about safety. And there are a lot of different opportunities. Like, for example, I think one really good time is bath time, especially as your kids are growing up. And they're pointing and they're talking. You say, oh, that's your, that's this area, that's that, right? Like, that's your penis, that's your vagina. And you're teaching them. And you say, oh, also, this is private. No one's allowed to see or touch this. You're not allowed to see or touch anyone else's, right? So again, you're having those conversations and you're finding those opportunities throughout their life. So there's no one specific time. It's ongoing and it's forever. From when they're little, like changing diapers, till they're older. You're always continually teaching them, just as you're continually parenting them, and just as they're always looking to you to learn. I don't know if I'm going to look at this. I don't know if I'm going to
In like 2 minutes, we're going to come around and collect questions so we have an opportunity to answer them during the talk.
You're good.
I just want to add one other thing. Also, I just want to say when your child asks you questions, take them at face value and have a very direct answer, because chances are your child is not looking for like a long-winded scientific explanation. They're probably just asking a simple question and they want a simple answer. And your child might repeat the question, but that doesn't mean they're looking for a different answer. Your child could be repeating questions because they're testing you and they want to say, is your answer going to change? Or they could have just forgotten. So their repeating questions doesn't mean that you have to change your answer. You can still give that same answer because they could be looking for reassurance. They could just forget. But you don't have to be changing your answer every time.
طيب نقدر احنا نعمل ايه كآباء في حماية اطفالنا او في مواجهة الموضوع ده؟ احنا ما نقدرش نبقى مع اولادنا طول اليوم، صح؟ لو نقدر نخليهم في حضننا في بيتنا طول اليوم واحنا معاهم في كل حتة هنعمل، صح؟ انا لو اقدر اخلي عيالي تحت جناحي طول الوقت هبقى عايزه اعمل كده، بس للاسف مش هنقدر. فايه الادوات اللي نقدر نديها لهم ان هم يقدروا يحموا بيهم نفسهم؟ وهي ان احنا نعلمهم، يعني نفهمهم جسمهم وجسدهم واعضائهم التناسليه وحتى كل اعضاء جسمهم بصفه عامه. دلوقتي لما الطفل بيتولد بيكبر، وبالتالي بيكبر برضو معاه اعضائه التناسليه، يعني هي باكج واحده، صح؟ يعني بمعرفه ده احنا عايزين الاولاد، ولادنا بنتي او ابني، تجيلي تسالني اسئله عن التطورات، ايه اللي بيحصل في جسمهم، صح؟ وايه هي اسماء واعضاء جسمهم، مظبوط؟ فاحنا عايزينهم يجوا لنا، هي دي اهم حاجه، التوطيد العلاقه ما بيني وبين ابني او بنتي عشان يجوا يسالوني او يجوا يحكوا لي. طيب لما نيجي نعلمهم عن جسمهم، عايزين نعلمهم الاسماء الصحيحه لكل اعضاء الجسم including الاعضاء التناسليه، صح؟ يعني احنا ما نروحش مثلا نقول لهم بنعلمهم لهم ايه، مش مناخيرك عينيك، بنروح نقول لهم دي بسكوتايه، دي بسبوسايه، دي لا، صح؟ بنقول لهم دي مناخير، دي عينين، دي بق، صح؟ فبالتالي الاعضاء التناسليه بالمثل، يبقى ده المهبل، ده القضيب، ده الصديق، يعني بنقول كل حاجه باسمها الصحيح. ليه سوري لازم يبقوا عارفينها بالانجليزي؟
I think definitely بالانجليزي عشان they're here. They need to know, yeah. It doesn't hurt to know it in Arabic, but I think they should know it in English. And من بدري, there's من هم صغيرين قوي عشان يعرفوا this is my elbow, this is my private area, you know. Sorry.
Perfect. طيب دلوقتي احنا هنعلمها لهم. دلوقتي تاني حاجه هنفكر فيها، يا لهوي هيفضحونا في نص الايل في وول مارت، هيقعدوا يقولوا مفيش اي مشكله، هيقولوها عادي مفيش مشكله، وبس هناخدها كنقطه تعليميه انه لا احنا مش، يعني احنا بنعلمهم ايه اعضائهم، اعضاء جسدهم اسمها ايه بالاسم الصحيح، ولكن ليها وقت وليها مكان يتقال فيها لانها حاجه خاصه بيهم، فهتتقال في البيت، هتتقال مع ماما وبابا، يعني ليها وقت معين، فهناخدها كنقطه تعليميه. ولكن ايه اهميه ان احنا لازم نعلمهم الاسماء الصحيحه لاعضاء جسمهم شامله، كل جسمهم شامله، انه لما بندي اسماء مش صحيحه للاعضاء الجسم بتدي صوره سلبيه، او ان احنا المفروض نخجل من الحاجه دي، صح؟ او مثلا لو جم سالونا ده مثلا ده اسمه ايه، طب ما هنقول مثلا دي الارداف، ده الثدي، ده المهبل، ده هنقول ده اسمه ايه، ما نضحكش ما نتكسفش، لان ده هيدي انطباع سلبي، ان دي حاجه المفروض اتكسف منها او حاجه المفروض انا اخاف منها. لكن لما نكون بنشرح وبنقول الاسماء الصحيحه بندي صوره ايجابيه، لان دي خلقه ربنا في الاول او في الاخر، صح؟ ربنا كلنا خلقنا، فدي عطيه الله، فاحنا هنتكلم عن ربنا خلقنا يعني عطيته ايه. طيب لما بتبقى الاولاد عارفه من بدري من سن صغير زي ما تينا قالت، لما مثلا بعد الشر لو اي طفل هيعرض لاساءه او اعتداء جنسي، الجاني هيخاف. ليه؟ لانه عارف ان الطفل ده عارف وفاهم. لما بيبقى عارف ان الطفل ده عارف وفاهم هيخاف، غير لما يبقى طفل ما عندوش فكره بالهوى، يبقى دي بالنسبه له دي الايه. مظبوط. فدي من كل يعني كل الحاجات المهمه اللي لازم نحصن بيها الاولاد. الحاجات دي احنا ممكن نبقى فاكرين انها حاجه مش مهمه، بس هي مهمه للغايه ان احنا نحمي بيها الاولاد. لا ما انا جايه لحضرتك ثانيه واحده. فامتى بقى نعمل الموضوع ده؟ احسن وقت بيبقى مثلا لما، خصوصا في السن الصغير، لما مثلا لما بنستحمى. الاطفال كيوريوس، يعني يبقوا عندهم حب الاستطلاع، ومفيش حاجه غلط في حب الاستطلاع. احنا هناخد السؤال، يعني تاخد السؤال تاخدوش في قلبك، او تاخد السؤال زي ما هو، وهترد مردات صغيره يعني ملائمه للسن، بحيث انها تبقى مردات بسيطه يقدروا يفهموها، مش مردات كبيره مجعلصه يبقى مش هيسمعوا لك. بس في نفس الوقت عايزين نعلمهم التعليم الصحيح. انت عايز تأسسهم. الطفل ده بيبقى عامل زي السفنجة، فاحنا عايزينه يشفط او يابزورب المعلومة الصحيحة منك من البيت، صح؟ مش عايزينهم يطلعوا يعرفوها بره من واحدة صاحبتها، ولا من واحد صاحبه في الباص، ولا من التلفزيون، ولا من الانترنت، وهتبقى معلومات كلها غلط. فاحسن حاجة ان هو يعرفها منك او منك من البيت.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to go through these next few slides really fast because we don't have a lot of time. So the first thing is give your child permission to say no. So as a culture, we're a very loving culture, which is not a bad thing. We love to give hugs and kisses, and that's okay. But your child might not want to give a tante or an uncle a hug or a kiss, and your child has to be able to say no. And you have to be able to support your child in that, because as a little kid, it's hard to say no to an adult in general. So letting your child know if you're uncomfortable with something, you can say no and I will support you. You don't have to give everyone hugs and kisses. So setting that standard for them. The other thing is letting your kids know about different types of touch. This is often called good touch and bad touch. We don't use those terms anymore for two reasons. One, because the words good and bad are very vague. So if your child comes home and you say, how was your day? And they say good, you don't know anything about their day, right? Like it's a very vague term. And the other reason is, unfortunately, the reality is, right, like what we would consider bad touch will feel good. And so an abuser can easily say, how can this be a bad touch if it feels good, right? So they can confuse the child or trick the child in that way. And so we try to stay away from good and bad for those reasons.
النقطة دي مهمة جدا، بس عايزين نتك عليها شوية، انه لازم يعني نشجع اولادنا ان هم من حقهم ان هم يقولوا لا. جسدها من حقها هي فقط، وبالتالي من حقها انها تقول لا. احنا ككالتشر احنا محبين جدا، صح؟ ودي حاجه مش غلط، ولكن الطفل من حقه، يعني انا مش لازم ارغمه لا حبيبي انت لازم هتبوس طنط، لا يا حبيبتي انت لازم هتروحي تدي هج الانكل، لا مش لازم. لو الطفل مش حابب ومش عايز هنحترم ده، ولازم نشجعه ان هو يقول لا. empower them ان هم يقولوا لا، ده من حقهم، جسدهم من حقهم، صح؟ فبالتالي ما حدش يشوف اعضائهم الخاصه، لا، صح؟ فيبقوا عارفين ان هو انا اقدر اقول لا. دي نقطه مهمه جدا. النقطه الثانيه، لازم نعلم اولادنا ان في نوعين من اللمس. في اللمسه اللي هي ماشي ما فيهاش حاجه، بس في اللمسه اللي هي لا. في الاوكي تاتش ماشي اوكي، لكن في اللمسه اللي هي لا، في حاجه غلط، صح؟ فلازم نبقى مفهمينهم الفرق ما بين الاثنين، ولازم يبقوا برضو عارفين، لان الجاني ممكن يستخدم دي انه لا ازاي ان اللمسه دي مش كويسه لو بتخليك تحس انك مبسوط. لا، في فرق ما بين اللمسه الخاطئه التي لا تليق، واللمسه اللي هي اتس اوكي، صح؟
I think, yeah, so we have a lot of really good questions, so I think we're going to pause. I'm sorry we didn't get to finish, but hopefully we'll finish it at a different time. But I want to make sure we get to these questions because this is what's important to you guys, and these are the questions that you guys are having. So the first question is, at what age should brothers and sisters stop changing in front of each other? That's a really good question. I don't know that there's a specific age, but I think there is an age when kids start to get a little bit more curious, maybe start like touching or whatever. So like when my kids were little, I used to give them baths together because they were so little, like 3 and under. But I think once they're old enough to know these are my private areas and they're private, I think that's when you need to maybe stop letting them change in front of each other or bathe in front of each other. There are kids coming in. That's a good question. That's a good question. What do you think, Mary? If they're the same gender, I think they still need to. Yeah. Yeah.
They tend to know when they're starting to feel uncomfortable. Like, if you notice or if they notice, gender irrelevant.
Yeah. I think so. What Mary said is gender is irrelevant. At the end of the day, they need to know that privacy is privacy, right? And those are their private areas. How to handle stories that kids say after the fact, like multiple days after the incident. I think that's okay. You know, I think it depends on what they're telling you. Is it something that's unsafe, something unsafe that happened to them? There's, you know, if a child says something happened to them, even if it happened days before, it's okay. The important thing is that you remain calm, you believe them, you give them reassurance. I'm just trying to find a slide that tells you what to do. So, like, remain calm, listen carefully, believe the child, reassure the child, you're safe, thank you for telling me, I love you, right? So giving them all of those things. Again, depending on what your child is specifically telling you. But before or after is not, kids probably will tell you after the fact, and it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, right? The important thing is that they told you and that you're giving them that comfort of thank you for telling me. Is hugging or kissing your spouse in front of your kids normal? Yes, it's normal. Your kids need to know that you and your partner love each other and that you show affection and that this is okay because you're adults and you're married and this is how married people show their affection, right? They just need to know that this is what you do, you know, when you're older, when you're married, when you're an adult. This is how married people show their affection, right? So the important thing is that they know that distinction. How frequently should you have these discussions, right? So there's a balance. Absolutely. There's 100% a balance. And I'm not saying it should be unprompted, right? So what I think about is if my child is going to be going to a camp they've never been to before, with people that they don't know and with teachers they don't know, if they're going to a new school, if they're starting a new grade, right? A reminder, hey, just a reminder, no one's allowed to see your private area, you're not allowed to see anyone else's private area, right? Again, during bath time, that's a natural time to be talking about their body. So finding those moments, I'm not saying you need to sit down with your child every day and talk about body safety, but you find those opportunities with your child, whether that's bath time, again, camp, school, going to a friend's house, like the first time they go to a friend's house by themselves. Hey, just so you know, if something makes you uncomfortable, this is what you can do. You can call me, have the adult call me, or say, you know, whatever it is. So like anytime your child is doing something that you feel they might be at risk, you should be having those conversations, or any opportune time like bath time, for example, again, or any quiet time, any one-on-one time, right? How could I know if this happened to my daughter and she didn't tell me? I don't know there's any way to know for sure, right? I think, again, we can't always know. We can't always be there with our kids, unfortunately, as much as we want to. But the important thing is that we're having constant communication and dialogue with our kids, and they know that we love them and that we believe them and that we're there for them, right? If, God forbid, something does happen, that we're going to be on their side, right? Like, that we want them to come to us.
You will see changes in behavior.
Yes, yeah, that's true, yes. So that the one about, you might see changes of behavior, again, any drastic changes of behavior of like nightmares or aggression or being in a bad mood or withdrawal. So like any of those changes of behaviors that we talked about earlier. Thanks, that's a good point. So this says childhood trauma and how to avoid it with my kids. Like, I'm assuming this means your own childhood trauma. I think one, the fact that you're mindful of it, the fact that you know you went through something and that you're trying to avoid passing that along to your child. I think it's really important to get professional help to process whatever you went through and that childhood trauma, and making sure you're not projecting it on your own child. And just remembering that your child is not you, right? So like whatever you experience doesn't necessarily mean that your child is going to experience it, you know. I think sometimes parents will say, well, this happened to me and this is how I acted and this is how my child is acting, so it must have happened to them. But just remember that everybody's different and trauma presents very differently for everybody. So it doesn't necessarily mean that something might have happened. I don't know if you want to add anything to that? No? Okay. I'm going through them so fast. Okay, so this one says, I talked to my child about this at a young age, and they got scared and said everyone's bad. They're very comfortable with strangers, and I keep warning them, but it's not working. So the thing about being scared, so there was a slide about strangers, right? I think the important thing to say to your kids is that most adults are safe, right? Most of the adults that you're going to see are going to be safe, but there are some adults that don't know how to keep children safe, and that's when you get that feeling and you feel uncomfortable, and that's when you tell an adult. But I think reassuring them that most people are safe, right? Like, you don't want them to go into the world thinking everyone's scary, everyone's bad, so I'm going to get hurt, right? You don't want them to have that feeling. So reminding them that most people are good and most people know how to take care of kids, but some people don't. And if you're in that situation, this is what you do. And this is how you know you're in that situation, right? So again, prevention and communication. And then being comfortable with strangers, I think, again, just reiterating that some people just don't know how to keep kids safe, right? And we want to make sure that you're always safe.
طيب في 3 أسئلة هنا. هو نفس السؤال على which أنا هقولها بالعربي عشان تينا already قالتها بالإنجليزي. تينا already went over that. ازاي اعمل ايه لو ابني او بنتي اتعرضوا لإساءة او لاعتداء جنسي. ف4 نقط. يعني أنا عارفة الموضوع ده هيبقى صعب، it's very hard to do، بس remain calm. لازم يبقى فيه هدوء من غير الأسئلة الكتيرة والتحقيق ويا خرابي لأنه الطفل في الحالة دي already خاف اترعب. يعني لو كان جاي لك عشان عايز يقول لك حاجة، وبعدين الطفل كمان هيبقى بيقول معلومة صغيرة في الأول بعدين معلومة أكبر بعدها. ليه؟ لأنه هو مستني يشوف رياكشنك إيه. فلو أنت رياكشنك كان عالي هو هيخاف يكمل. فأنت عايز تبقى هادي بكل اللي تقدر عليه. صلي في سرك انك تبقى هادي، بس لازم تبقى هادي. انا عارفه ان الموضوع ده صعب، بس لازم يبقى فيه هدوء علشان تقدر تطلع من الطفل ايه اللي حصل له علشان تقدر تساعده. النقطه الثانيه انه لازم نسمع يعني بحرص. ثانك يو. بحرص شديد جدا. ثانك يو. اي نو. لازم نسمع بحرص شديد جدا، وما تبقاش الاسئله اللي هو انت متاكد، هو ما يمكن. لا، مش لازم نشككه. ليه؟ لان هو اول حاجه هيشك في نفسه، فهيسحب الكلام اللي قاله، وهيحس ان انها غلطته، او انه فعلا لا انا فعلا لا انا اكيد فهمت حاجه غلط، مع انه لا. فاحنا عايزين الطفل يبقى آمن وقادر ان هو يطلع اللي جواه واللي شافه واللي مر بيه. ولازم نصدق الطفل. لازم نصدق الطفل يبقى عارف ان ماما وبابا مصدقيني، مش ماما وبابا مكذبيني. صح؟ ونحسسهم بالكلمات اللي هو انا اسف ان انت مريت بالموضوع، وانا مبسوط ان انت جيت كلمتني، وانا بحبك، وانا هنا علشان اساعدك وامر بيك. صح؟ زي ما نقول ايه، همر بيك لبر الامان، هساعدك ان how to take care of you. فالثلاث اسئله دول كانت على الحته دي.
While Diana's doing the next one, I just want to say, if God forbid your child does disclose sexual abuse, there are things that you can do. You can call 911, call the police. If you're not sure and you're not sure where to start with your child's doctor. I think that's a great first resource. If you're not sure, you don't understand what happened, but you think something happened, go to your pediatrician. It's a great starting point, and they'll know what to do.
في معلش سؤال تاني، انه لو انا ابني مهتم قوي يعرف الامور دي، ماشي، ما احنا عايزينه يجي ويسالك، ده كويس قوي، خليه يجي ويسالك، وانت اللي تديله الاجابه الصحيحه، وانت اللي تديله المعلومه الصحيحه تطلع من البيت. فخليهم يجوا يسالوكوا، مفيش اي حاجه غلط في الحته دي. انا عندي، طيب في سؤال بيقول انا عندي ولد وبنت اخوات، فشافوا بعض قبل كده، فسالوا ليه احنا مختلفين. شافوا بعض عيانين فقالوا لبعض احنا ليه مختلفين. Okay. Never mind. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. طيب ما هو لازم يبقوا عارفين ان ربنا خلق الولد يكون البنت ان ربنا خلق الولد باعضاء مختلفه عن البنت. ده ما فيش حق، يعني هو المفروض ما يشوفوش بقى يعني، بس انا قصدي انه ما فيهاش حاجه غلط انك تقول لهم انه البنت دي اعضائها التناسليه والولد هو ده اعضائه التناسليه، لان بعد كده الولاد في المدرسه هيتعلموا ده في الدراسه، فهم هيعرفوا الموضوع ده في الدراسه. السؤال ده مهم. لو ابني او بنتي سالوني مين الحق انه يشوفني عريان او يساعدني في الشاور. ما فيش حد يشوفك في الحمام غير لو ماما او بابا، بس غير كده ما فيش. فلو زي ما تينا قالت، لو انا مثلا عند بيت صاحبي او بنت عند بيت صاحبتها ومش مرتاحه، تكلم ماما. ماشي، ما فيش حد له الحق انه يشوف جسمي غير يا ماما يا بابا، او لو رايحين عند الدكتور ومعايا ماما وبابا. يس فاحنا ممكن نديهم الليسته. ما هو انا ساعات، ما انا اولادي ساعات بيقعدوا مع ماما وبابا، فبنديهم لسته مين الناس الامنه، ما تيتا جدو ماما بابا، بس مش حد تاني. يس احنا دايما كأب احنا دايما احنا دايما بنعلم اولادنا باستمرار من اول ما بيتولدوا لغايه لما يعني يو سند them off، صح؟ بس احنا دايما في تعليم مستمر للطفل، فدايما تاخدوا كل opportunity مع الطفل انك تعلموه. حتى لو مثلا مارتينا بتقول مثلا لو انا ابني او بنتي مثلا في الحمام طلبت المساعده، او ان انا داخله مثلا انا مسح بنتي او ابني او بنتي، يبقى انا هقول لهم ان انا يعني ان انا هعمل كده، او يبقوا برضه ودي تاخدوها teachable moment ان انتوا تعلموهم اسم العضو الجنسي ده ايه، علشان هم يبقوا على طول فاهمين ومتعلمين وواعيين. يعني اهم نقطه هنا الوعي.
I'm sorry, I know we're over time. I just want to say one thing, that children are extremely resilient. And I say that to say, if your child experienced something that's scary, and I'm not talking just about sexual abuse, right? In general, if your child experienced something scary, it doesn't have to determine the rest of their life, right? The thing children need the most is a loving, consistent caregiver, and that's you. Just by being here today, right, you're doing that for your child. So I just want you to know, it doesn't determine, if your child experiences something scary, it doesn't determine the rest of their life. It doesn't ruin them, right? It doesn't like decide their trajectory for the rest of their life. They're going to be okay because they have you, and there's a lot of resources available to help them. So I just want to end on that note, that children are going to be okay. Yes? Yeah.
It's the same way that you all, if you went through something, I'm very loud. It's the same way that, like, if anyone here ever experienced anything, sexual abuse or anything at all, that felt traumatic, you're still great parents, right? Like, just because something happened to you doesn't define who you are as a parent. It's the same way for your child.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, Lelman.
4 weeks in a row. طيب هننده اسماء الناس اللي حضروا اربع اسابيع ورا بعض. نورين شرقاوي. هاي. كريستين اسكندر. ميري ميخائيل. مجدي ابراهيم. أمجد عطية. مريم عطية. مينا جرجس. مرقص. Yeah, thank you.
I just know Marcos's last name. It's the only one.
وفاء. نسمة أبو اليمين. لا أنا شاطرة جدا. أنت ما شفتش أدائي في العربي ولا إيه؟ أميرة قديس. Hi. How are you? How is everything? Did you have fun? Yeah.
Go ahead, pick one. خلاص كده؟ اوكي. طب في اتنين بقى اللي هم الناس اللي هم نيو كامر.
طب الناس الجديدة فين الناس الجديدة؟ ليسا. لورا. فين؟ لوران ماثيو ليسا هنري في حدا تاني؟ That's it?
Okay, this is ticket number 1.
All right. Which numbers do we say? The last four? The last four. 1, 2, 1. Ah! They're so sweet. You're lucky the eclipse has its effects for you today. Yep. 116. 116. أهلا. Thank you. 128. مساء الخير. Thank you.
I think, yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. All done.
احنا عايزين نقول ثانك يو في الاول تيم. عايزين نقول ثانك يو فور اول تيم اجابي. وبعدين عايزين ناخدوا بيكتشر معاهم كلهم. بس نصلي الاول. نصلي وبعدين ناخد البيكتشر. لازم بالتيشيرت ده ناخد بيكتشر. لازم. معلش. هو انا مش لابسه تيشيرت يعني ده ما قلتليش تيشيرت بس.
Okay, let's pray.
صح يا ماجي؟
Okay, in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Lord, hear us when we pray thankfully, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Through Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory now. Okay, everybody up here for a picture. Up here. Apparently we're doing a picture. Picture.
Yes, yes.
So did he say, or did you keep him? Did he say it?
I want you in the picture, Gabriel. I want you. Just you. Apparently we're doing a picture.